Never, ever wait to hire a real estate lawyer for your home purchase or sale. It could save you thousands of dollars knowing exactly what you're agreeing to. Today, we're talking about the legal stuff in real estate, all the parts that can help you and some of the parts that can hurt you if you're not aware of them. Honestly, buying property gets stressful, mostly because of the forms, the deadlines, the deposits, and the tiny details. So today, I've got Umar Khan. He's the principal real estate lawyer at Meadows Law. He's handled over 2,500 real estate transactions. So he's seen common mistakes first-time home buyers or first-time sellers make. And for those of you who are not first time, you should still stick around just in case you're coming back on the market. We want to show you how to avoid all of those mistakes. We're going to break down offers, conditions, deposits, closing costs, title insurance, and what happens on closing day. So you feel confident, like 100% confident that you're covered. This is an episode you don't want to skip. Let's get into it. So if you're looking to make your next move, whether it's to Orangeville, Dufferin County, or the surrounding area, people just like you reach out to me every single week to help them with their next move. And I would love to have a private conversation with you to see how I can help you make the right decisions, avoid costly mistakes, and properly guide you through the process. Click on the link in the description below to set up a time. Now let's get into this episode. So today we're here with Umar, and Umar is a real estate lawyer, and I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. The legal side of a transaction sometimes is one of the areas that we don't see a lot of. So today I really want to dig in with Umar and learn as much as possible. So Umar, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into real estate law.
Well, my name's Umar. As you know, I always wanted to practice an area of law which was happy, right? So when people are purchasing, they're happy. When people are selling, they're happy. Even if it's a distressed sale, they're getting out of a bad situation. And when people are refinancing, they're consolidating their debts. And who doesn't want to do that? So really it was kind of by process of elimination. Really all the other areas of law, I said, you know what? It's too emotionally charged. It's too much back and forth. Real estate is, and so people are just happy. And I like dealing with people at their best, not their worst. So that's how I got into it.
That's great. What parts of the process do you think people think you handle, but you actually don't handle that?
Planning and subdivisions, I don't handle. So even though we're a full service real estate law firm, we don't handle the planning and subdivision aspects of it. You need a municipal planning lawyer for that.
Excellent. And you have your own law firm, right? Did you always have your own law firm?
No, I've been practicing for 5 years at various law firms that did about 40 to 50 transactions per month. So very fast paced, high volume. But Meadows Law opened in January of 2025. So it's been a year and 1 month.
Excellent. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So what do you handle that first-time homebuyers don't realize is a big deal?
We negotiate the agreement of purchase and sale. So that's really important. So a lot of times it's agents and hats off to agents because they have a very tough job. But we handle the drafting and negotiating of the agreement of purchase and sale, which is really important, especially for first-time homebuyers.
What's the biggest misconception you hear about real estate lawyers?
That they don't care. They don't spend enough time on the paperwork. They kind of just get it through, which, I mean, when you have a busy practice, it happens. But I treat every client as if it's my family member, right? So the first thing that I learned when I started practicing real estate law was, you know what? Deal with every transaction as if it's your mom and dad sitting across the table from you, and you won't ever disappoint a client. And you know what? I've done that in my practice in the law firm. In 1 year, I have over 60 Google reviews, 5 stars. So I feel like it's working.
Yeah, I think so. That's great. So what is one mistake that you see repeatedly happen that maybe a first-time home buyer should know about?
When it comes to the agreement of purchase and sale or in closing?
Either. Both. Hey, whatever's helpful.
In the agreement of purchase and sale, really knowing about the hot water tank, whether it's a rental or not, because that's really important to know if it's going to be paid out on closing or not. And then on closing, not having your funds ready on time. So it's really important to have your funds ready on time because the lawyer needs it by 10 a.m. on your closing date because that's when the banks are going to fund. So unfortunately, banks put funds on hold. There's a bunch of different issues that happen. So having your money readily available is really important. So budget accordingly.
That's really great. It's an important piece of information to keep in mind because first-time home buyers, some have saved up for a long, long time. Some, they're getting their money from their family or as a gift. So we want to make sure that it's where it needs to be on time on closing date. That's a really great call out. So, when should anyone approach a lawyer during a transaction? This is kind of one of those things where we, as real estate agents, always say, you're about to put an offer in, make sure that you've reached out to your lawyer so that they have an opportunity to review it as well,
Yeah.
even before you accept. Or should they be waiting 5 days before closing when title
No,
search
at the
happens?
earliest, we say when you're putting an offer in. So as soon as possible is my best advice.
Yeah.
At the latest, I would say by the title search date, which is in the urea form.
Title search, yes, at the latest. But tell us a little bit about what the difference is. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the episode. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future guests. Know someone I should interview or want to hear more about a specific topic? Leave a comment or message me directly. All the links are in the description below. Now let's get back to the episode. Do you think it's important or more important for them to reach out to you in the beginning of the transaction?
Yes,
And tell
absolutely.
us why that is.
Because we can help negotiate the agreement of purchase and sale. We can potentially flag any issues that are there. And it's just the peace of mind of knowing that you have a lawyer in your corner as soon as the deal. I mean, you're putting a big
Yeah.
investment in on a property, so it's important to have representation.
What delays, is there anything that delays things right from the start?
Not having the information. So at the beginning of a file, we ask for IDs on a purchase. We ask for whether you're a first-time home buyer, your marital status, who you're getting mortgage instructions from. You have to arrange for property insurance. We have to order title insurance on your behalf. So there's a few moving parts. So it's really important to get all the information up front so that you can have a smooth transaction.
Is there anything else that makes it a smooth transaction?
Really just having the documents up front and getting mortgage instructions as soon as possible. But these days, the banks are taking their time with mortgage instructions, which is totally fair. But getting
All
mortgage
right.
instructions is really, really important because that's how you know how much to budget for.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. If we want to dig a little bit deeper in the agreement of purchase and sale, what are the three clauses you would say people should understand before signing?
Financing, inspection, and for condo status certificate.
Ooh, tell us a little bit more about those three and why those are really important for you.
Financing is important because if you don't have financing, you can't move forward with the deal. So it's important to have a mortgage in place or at least a pre-approval. Inspection is important because again, you're buying a very expensive property. You want to make sure everything checks out by someone who's qualified because what we can see with the naked eye, sometimes we can't see behind closed doors, as they say. You can't
Right.
really tell if there's mold in the property. You don't know if there's a leak. So an inspection is really important. And the status certificate gives you the health of the condominium corporation. So knowing if there's going to be any unforeseen so that's really important to have a status certificate review condition in a condo.
So when you're reviewing an agreement of purchase and sale, what red flags have you seen in the past or you want to give a heads up to people in the audience that are first time home buyers that they should look out for?
Just knowing if there's a rental with the hot water tank or the furnace or the water
Right.
softener, for example. And then reading Schedule A is really important because the area forms are pretty standard, but Schedule A kind of is what gives real estate transactions their uniqueness. So it's
Yes.
important to read Schedule A as close as possible to understand if there's any credits on closing adjustments, whether there's going to be a lockbox or whether keys are going to be delivered via a courier, things like that.
Excellent. And if you could motivate someone to read something twice on that agreement of purchase and sale, what would it be?
It'd be Schedule A because again, that's what gives transactions their uniqueness. So every deal more or less is the same, but that's what gives it kind of its own flavor. So it's important
Right.
to read Schedule A as closely as possible because that's kind of what makes a transaction stand out from another one.
Tell us a little bit about Schedule A. What is on Schedule A?
So Schedule A has things like conditions. It has things like adjustments on closing, how the funds are to be transferred, things like that.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually part of the agreement of purchase and
It
sale.
forms a firm and binding contract. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Anytime you sign any of the documents through a realtor, they are binding. That's why it's so important to bring it to your real estate lawyer because you want to make sure you know what your rights are, you know what you're signing, and especially if you're a first-time home buyer and you're seeing these clauses for the first time, they are written very legal and legal terminology. So we want to make sure that you understand them. What are the most common mistakes first-time home buyers make during the conditional period?
Waiving conditions when there's no need to. So sometimes you want to make a strong offer, which is understandable. You want to go as firm as you can. It also depends on the market, but at the end of the day, if you're not ready to waive a condition, you shouldn't feel pressure to do so. So usually conditions are for 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. On commercial properties, the conditional period's a lot longer. So sometimes we
Yes.
have conditions for 45 days, 60 days. But again, waiving a condition when you're not ready to do so can ultimately hurt you. It looks good in the seller's eyes, but ultimately, conditions are usually in the favor of the buyer, not the seller. So it's really on the buyer's side, but we see them.
So, when it comes to conditions and timelines, Umar, what are the most common mistakes first time homebuyers make during the conditional period?
Waiving conditions too early, right? Because a lot of conditions are in the favor of the buyer. You have 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. For commercial properties, you have 45 days, 60 days. It looks really attractive in the seller's eyes when you waive conditions, but it could hurt you ultimately at the end of the day if you're not ready to waive conditions. So don't waive them until the timeline's ready or until you're ready.
Excellent. What does waiving mean? Because there's fulfilling a condition and then waiving a condition. What does that mean from your
Waiving
perspective?
conditions means it's not fulfilled, but you're choosing to waive your right to have that condition. So waiving it is kind of like
Mm.
canceling it.
Absolutely. And so you can't go back on that and say, wait a minute, I'm waiving the inspection condition. It's a new home. I think everything is great. I just want this house so bad. And then you waive it. And then down the road before closing, you've gone in for another visit and you're starting to see things. And
Right.
you
And that
can't
hurts.
go back and ask for the inspection. Yeah, absolutely. So it's always important to talk to your realtor, ensure that they are the kind of realtor that's going to really advise you on getting that condition fulfilled as
Yep.
opposed to waiving it. Awesome. What are the non-negotiable deadlines people miss? Are there any?
24 hours to get the deposit after the offer is accepted.
Yes.
That's a big
Yep.
one because if you do that, you're in breach of the contract and you can be sued for damages and you lose your deposit.
So tell us a little bit more about that. Do you have a specific story about a time that that happened?
Unfortunately not. I don't do litigation, so I don't have any horror stories. A lot of my deals, luckily, thank God, knock on wood, they go very smoothly.
They're
So,
very clean. Good.
5 years, but, when it does, I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah, we'll bring you back on the podcast for that story. How should buyers communicate with their lawyers during those days? When it's conditional period, what do you advise in terms of the type of conversations they should have with you?
Really just get the information to us as soon as possible and always ask before you're thinking of waiving and fulfilling condition so the lawyer can review it and take a look. We can always take a look to see and ask the right questions depending on the condition.
Absolutely. We
Because
talked a
some
little bit of,
conditions, for
yeah,
example, an inspection condition could lead to an amendment, right? Because there's things
yes.
that popped up in the inspection report that you want fixed. So the contract kind of flows from one step to another, which is important to have a lawyer. A realtor can do it as well, but we help
Mhm.
realtors draft clauses all the time. So you might as well go right to the source.
I think it's really important as a realtor myself. I would never take on something that a client says, "Well, I really want my lawyer to look at it." I'm like, "Absolutely.
Right.
Take it to the lawyer, bring it back to me. We'll review what the lawyer said and we'll proceed." Because I've always seen, and I'd love your opinion on this. I've always seen the real estate agent as like a mini project manager where it's like
Yep.
we're doing the front end work, but then we have all of these partners that we bring into the conversation to help with decision making, to help with the legal piece of it, the financial piece of it. And we don't take any of that on. So we want to encourage our clients to have these all important conversations. And one of the reasons I brought you on today, the legal side of it is one of the most important, if not the most important side of a real estate transaction. You need to know your rights. You need to know if things are going to end up in litigation, if you're deciding in one way or another. And so, really, that's kind of how I see a realtor referring our clients to the right people at the right time.
I agree 100%.
Excellent. Well, that was easy. You're easily agreeable. I love it. So we talked a little bit about deposits, but tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, what are they for? Where do they go? And what puts a deposit at risk?
So first year contract law says that for a contract to be binding, you need a few things. One of those things is consideration. So whether it's $1, $100,000, at the end of the day, you need some type of money to change hands for a contract to be firm and binding.
Excellent. And what happens if a buyer is late with a deposit? You mentioned that earlier.
The seller can sue for damages. Whether they will is another story, but you're technically in breach of a contract. So really,
That's
it's
right.
risky to be late with your deposit.
Yeah. And it's important to know, and I think especially for first time home buyers, when you sign on that dotted line that your realtor sends out with the agreement of purchase and sale and then all the other documents that you're signing under seal. That is legal and
Signed,
legally
sealed, and delivered.
binding.
Correct.
Yes, legally binding means, what does that mean? Legally binding, signing under seal
Legally means
from
that the
your
rights are
perspective.
enforceable under contract law.
That's exactly it. Any best practices for certified funds, wire transfers, avoiding last minute panic?
As
What's the
early as
best way to,
possible, as early as
yeah.
possible, and always call your lawyer to confirm their banking details, because in the age of fraud, there's so much that happens. Emails can be hacked, funds can be redirected, so it's important to call your lawyer to confirm those details.
All right, now we're going to jump into title searches.
Sure.
So, what do you look for with title searches and what issues show up most often in Ontario specifically? But if you're seeing them in different towns and cities or different types of properties like rural to versus suburban, what do you see most often?
Really, we look for the chain of title to see that the land can be properly conveyed.
Yep.
There's mortgages on title, there's notice of security interest on title, there's hot water tanks, for example. Sometimes wells are on title. So we really look for those things, encroachments, easements, things of that nature, just to make sure everything gets dealt with appropriately. Because the seller has an obligation under the agreement of purchase and sale to deliver free and clear title, right? You have to deliver marketable title. So those things will make
Yes.
it unmarketable. Title insurance is really helpful, though. It steps in to deal with a lot of these issues.
That's awesome. I'm going to ask you about title insurance in a minute.
Sure.
But if you can tell me a little bit about when, like, do we wait until 5 days before or 10 days before closing to really take a look at title? Is there anything a realtor or a buyer can do ahead of time?
Really, title searches can be done at any time, but the letter of requisitions is due usually 2 weeks before the closing date. So that gives enough time for the seller's lawyer to request a discharge statement, for example, deal with any issues that are on title, and have a bit of a discussion with the purchaser's lawyer. But the purchaser's lawyer is the one who sends the title search date out.
What's the difference between kind of when you've seen something that's a bit of a hiccup, maybe a little obstacle that can be worked through to like a complete deal breaker? What's the difference between those?
Usually, when there's things on title that can be discharged, that's a bit of a hiccup, but things that can be worked through. And a deal breaker is something like an old mortgage which is sitting on title and no one can get hold of a lender because, again, if there's an old mortgage on title, they still have rights on the property. And that can be a big issue. So we've seen that quite a few times where there's old mortgages that just haven't been discharged in years.
What does that mean, an old mortgage that hasn't been discharged in years? What does that look like on your end?
Usually they just don't get around to it. So they could have forgot it, might have slipped through the cracks. So they likely got paid. But again, the purchaser has no way of verifying that. So it's best to get it discharged. But sellers are hesitant to give discharges of mortgages when they don't know what's going on. So they have to get in hold of the lender. And lenders sometimes are very slow to respond, which is difficult.
Oh, that's so interesting. I haven't come across that yet. I have come across a well that wasn't on title. That
Yeah,
was fun. Literally the last 2 days before closing. That was a blast.
I can imagine.
What can cause closing delays for first timers? Have you ever seen, or even for anybody, have you ever seen a close date actually need to be extended?
Yeah, extensions happen all the time. Usually it's because we don't have mortgage instructions in time. So it's because of financing. So again, all things go back to financing. Have it as early as possible,
So
have it as
good.
soon as possible. But again, the process is out of your control, which can be a little frustrating. It's frustrating for us as well.
Yes.
But once we get mortgage instructions, things are relatively smooth. Sometimes there's conditions on the mortgage which the broker has to fulfill. Sometimes there's solicitor conditions that have to be fulfilled. So sometimes, depending on the bank, there can be some delays in getting funding once we have mortgage instructions. But generally, once we have mortgage instructions, everything's nice and smooth.
Yeah, such an important point. Like, I like that we're continuously going back to the financial piece of this transaction and how important it is to have all those ducks in a row by the time we get to the closing period, like that period between acceptance and closing.
Yep.
And so, we always say as a real estate agent, we always tell any first time home buyers or anyone, like, get pre-approved. It needs a
Yeah,
mortgage. Get pre-approved before you
for
come
sure.
to the table, before you start searching for a home. It just gets you further down the road with your mortgage and with your financial institution than it would if we're like, oh, I'm just looking around and oh my God, I love this house. And now you're starting from scratch. So if you're out there looking for a house, it's so important to get pre-approved. Typically they hold that rate for about 3 months. And if the rate goes
Correct.
down, then your rate goes down. So there's nothing wrong and nothing
It's win-win.
that's going to hurt you for getting pre-approved, and it'll help you even at the closing. So
Correct.
important. Let's go to title insurance now. How do you get title insurance? What does that mean?
So title insurance is ordered through a portal. So there's 3 title insurance providers in Ontario: First Canadian Title, which is who we deal with, Chicago Title, and Stewart Title. So title insurance will ask certain underwriting questions, and you'll have to submit those questions. You have to submit IDs, and then you get the title insurance policy release.
And so why is title insurance important to get?
Really, because it protects known title defects and identity theft. Those are the 2 biggest things, and fraud on the property. And any known title
That's
defects is really
amazing.
important. Yeah.
And at what point does a buyer get title insurance?
Once we have the mortgage instructions, because title insurance has a homeowner policy and it has a lender policy. So you get the homeowner policy at any time, but the lender policy, they need certain information from the lender. So it
Right.
insures the lender against loss as well.
That's really, yeah. For me, title insurance has always been one of those things where I don't think about a lot, but it's really important to have and to understand what it means for this entire process. Do you have a real example of title insurance saving someone?
Yeah, so we had a purchaser on the statement of adjustments on closing. The seller said they paid the property taxes for the whole year, which are like $6,000. It turned out they didn't pay a penny. So the purchaser received a bill in the mail saying that they owe $6,000 property taxes plus interest. We submitted a title insurance claim, and within a week, they reimbursed them for the payment.
Oh, that's amazing. That saves the day. When do you push for it the most? Is it with older homes, rural
Always,
properties, condos? Always. I was getting there.
always need title insurance. Yeah, when you're dealing
Always
with
get
metals,
title
you always need
insurance.
title insurance. Yeah, you need the homeowner policy when it's a cash purchase, even, and you need the lender
Yeah,
policy. Every lender needs a lender policy.
absolutely. No, that's great. Insurance, insurance, insurance. It's always good to have that, especially when you're in the middle of this type of transaction for sure.
So there's a few things title insurance does not cover.
Okay.
It doesn't cover environmental hazards. So, for example, soil contamination. It doesn't cover native land claims.
Uh,
Problems only discovered by a new survey or inspection of your property. So, for example, the property's smaller than originally thought. Issues that weren't listed in the public record. So, for example, unrecorded liens and encroachments, zoning bylaw violations from changes, renovations, or addition to your property or land. And it doesn't provide coverage for things like floods, theft, things like that.
Wow. Okay. So then what does it cover?
It covers known title defects.
Right.
It covers identity theft, fraud, things of that nature, property
Okay.
taxes.
Fantastic. Is there anything else we should know about title insurance?
It's really important to have. And if you have a lawyer saying you don't need title insurance, you might want to switch lawyers.
So now we're going to jump into closing costs and adjustments.
Yep.
I think this is such an important conversation, especially for first-time home buyers. It can surprise people that get to the end of this transaction and then they look at the bill and they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize this was all part of the closing costs, adjustments, and so on." What surprises have you seen the most when it comes to closing costs and adjustments?
Usually when you're dealing with a builder, because again, the builder, the
Mm,
agreement of purchase and sale will just say deposit, purchase price, and then they have all the adjustments. They list some of the adjustments, they don't list the other ones. So a lot of
yep,
times builder deals, the client will have to bring in an additional $50,000, $60,000 of development charges, landscaping fees, driveway paving fees, etc. So it's really on
right.
new build agreement purchase sales where there's a bit of a surprise.
Is there anything about the purchase of a new is there anything else about the purchase of a new build from a legal perspective that you would want the audience to know about, first-time buyers to know about?
Yeah, if your agreement is conditional, it's always good to have it reviewed. So we do reviews for agreement purchase and sales for free for our agents and clients. It's really important to have it reviewed because you want to know what you're getting yourself into. And these agreements are 60 to 70 pages in length, so they're very expansive.
They
So we look
are.
for a lot of things when it comes to those. So it's important to get it reviewed as soon as possible because if you want to back out of the deal, you can within 10 days. Depending on if it's a condo or a freehold townhome, there's a cooling off period.
Yes, yeah, and it's still 10 days, correct?
It's still 10 days, yeah.
Okay, perfect. See, that's really important. I'm so glad I asked that question because did you say the word free?
Yeah, yeah.
That you would
It's free.
review that for free?
Yeah. It's
That's
value add.
incredible.
There's that charge for it. But again, I
Yes.
mean, we make them if you move forward with the purchase, we make the money on the purchase anyway, so it's not a big deal.
That's amazing. And I gotta say, having dealt with, a builder purchase, They are 40 pages, 50, like you said, 50 pages
Easily.
long. And
Yeah.
for anyone who doesn't understand the jargon, and this is why I say, it's an opportunity to stand on my soapbox for a minute, but this is why I say always have representation, even if you are buying from a builder. A builder, you will
Especially when you're
go.
buying from.
Exactly. A builder will they don't they're realtors that are sitting at in their sales areas. Sometimes they're not realtors. And that's law. They don't have to be real estate agents. And so you walk in and you are dealing with the builder's agent if they are an agent. And so who do you think that builder agent is going to look after? They're going to look
Of
after their
course.
client. So
Yeah.
you're coming in, they're handing you a 50-page document and expecting that you're going to be able to read it and deal with it. And then you've come across this beautiful podcast and you know that Metal's Law and Umar is going to review that for you, which is fantastic. But being able to know that you can actually counter those conditions that are on that really official 50-page document, a lot of people may not know that. And so
No,
it's
look, I
so,
mean,
so important.
the reality is they want to sell the property as bad as you want to buy it. So there's always room for
Yes.
negotiation in contracts.
Always. Absolutely. And always. Are the costs predictable when it comes to closings and adjustments? Or does it all depend on the home?
Adjustments are normally the purchase price minus the deposit, plus minus adjustment for property taxes. So it depends how much property taxes they've paid, and depending on where in the year we are. Common
Right.
expenses for condos, and then propane for a lot of rural properties. As far as legal fees are concerned, there's two models. So some lawyers will charge legal fees plus disbursements. Other lawyers like myself charge flat fees. So you know upfront how much you have to pay. And then there's land transfer tax, title insurance, the interior government registration fees. So there's a few disbursements that are added, but again, it kind of just depends on the model and the law firm you're dealing with.
That's right. Is there like a sample budget that you can provide the audience around what those could potentially look like in terms of
Two
legal
to five
fees?
to 5% of the total purchase price.
Excellent. That's great. So, if I have a first time home buyer, what legal prep should be done before listing to avoid last minute issues? So, now I'm going to flip it and say this first time person is a first time seller. They've never sold a home before, it's their first house. Like, what should they know from a legal perspective before they put their house on the market?
It should always be sold for enough to pay out the mortgage. That's really important because a lot of times people don't sell for high enough. So I had a situation just 2 weeks ago where there's three mortgages on the property. The purchase price doesn't cover them, so there's a $60,000 shortfall. Ultimately, though, luckily we were able to negotiate with the lenders. It was also a power of sale situation, so the lender was going to take the home, but everyone was willing to negotiate just so the sale could go through. But it's really important to run your numbers on sale. So nothing from a legal perspective, I would say, but it's really important to know your numbers on a sale and make sure that you have enough equity there to sell it for what you're selling it for.
Right. And so, like a buyer would bring the agreement of purchase and sale to a lawyer, do you recommend the seller do the same?
Yeah, I mean, because again, the conditions are so in favor of the buyer that you want to make sure the seller's not hurting any of their rights.
Right.
So a seller should always
Excellent.
send the agreement of purchase and sale to the lawyer as well and say, hey, we got this agreement of purchase and sale. We just like to review it just to see if there's any red flags.
Great.
Because
Are
for
there any
sellers,
other
are you leaving the property as is? What
Yeah.
representations and warranties are you making about the chattels and fixtures? Is it has to be broom swept? Is there going to be a lockbox? How are you willing to accept the money from them? So there's all things we look for in a agreement purchase sale for sellers.
Yes, that's good. What documents, or are there any other documents that you're looking for from sellers that you wish they had earlier?
Property tax bill, IDs, mortgage statement, void checks, whether the hot water tank is a rental and who the rental is with.
I love how you're answering all these questions. It's like you know your stuff. It's like
I've done it
it's
for
like a
5 years.
list in your head.
I've
That's
done it for
amazing.
5 years, so luckily I have the experience.
Well, yeah, luckily. That's amazing. Do you have any examples of like the biggest, oh boy, no, that you see a week before closing?
No, not really.
No? Everything goes so smoothly with you. This is so good. Why
I'm
do you
very
think
lucky,
things
to be
have
honest.
gone? Tell me a little bit about why you think things have gone so smoothly. Like
It's just
what's
luck, to
happening
be
in
honest,
your
and I think
yeah?
people have a good team around them. People have good agents and brokers, which makes my life easier. So I always
There you
like
go.
dealing with professionals, right? So it always makes the process smoother. A lot of investor clients are pretty savvy, so they know what they're doing. First time home buyers, of course, There's a few hiccups along the way, but I try to be proactive, right? That's the thing about me is I'll send emails early, I'll text, I'll call, I'll make sure that we have the information to avoid those issues so we can kind of see where the fire is going to be and avoid it.
That's amazing. For me, proactivity is probably the most important thing. I worked many years in corporate, and so being proactive in this type of process and being able to see and advise before something happens is so, so important. So, such a good trait to have, Umar. So, let's talk about disclosures in Ontario. What does a seller have to disclose and what's misunderstood? Is there anything that's misunderstood?
Yeah, so the case law, there's a distinction between a patent defect and a latent defect. So a patent
Yes.
defect is something that you can see with your naked eye. So I mean, even if there's a mirror and there's a hole behind the wall, it's buyer beware. So the seller doesn't have to
Yes.
disclose that. The seller only has to disclose something that the buyer couldn't reasonably see and they have knowledge of. But at law, that's a very hard argument to make that they have knowledge of something. How do you prove someone had knowledge of something? Maybe there's an invoice that you found. Maybe there was some type of work that they said that they did, but a seller doesn't have to disclose anything. Caveat emptor, which means buyer beware.
So when a seller doesn't make a disclosure and the buyer actually finds out later that it is something they should have said, how does that typically go? Like how does a buyer protect themselves in that particular case? Can they protect themselves in that particular case?
Yeah, so you can always do an amendment to the agreement of purchase and sale. So you reach out to your realtor and say, hey, we noticed this issue. We want it fixed. We might want an abatement, which is a reduction of the purchase price, which is adjusted as an adjustment on
Yep.
closing. Or if they say no to the amendment, then it comes to the lawyer's file. And then the lawyer has to negotiate with the other lawyer and say, hey, we found these issues. The property is not in the same state and condition as it was when you put an offer in. So we need this issue resolved. Our client's seeking an abatement. Our client is seeking, an amendment. Our client is
Mm.
seeking a host of options.
Is there anything they can do after closing?
You can always sue in small claims court for damages, but again, that's a little pricey and it's very timely.
Now we have reached the portion of our podcast session where I have a couple of questions that are maybe myths, maybe misunderstood, and I would love your thoughts and opinions on that. Okay. You don't need a lawyer until a few days before closing. True or false?
Technically true, but I would say false because you want a lawyer as early as the title search date so that any issues can be resolved. If you get a lawyer a few days before closing, you're very likely going to need an extension because there's going to be title related issues.
Right. Great call. And what should a first time home buyer do earlier than they think?
Contact a lawyer.
There you go. Perfect. If I waive conditions and then change my mind, I could just walk away.
No,
Tell us
that's
more.
it's done. You can't just walk away from a deal. You have no legal grounds to walk away from a deal.
You're locked in.
Conditions
You're
are there
locked
to
into
help.
a deal.
You're locked in, correct.
Absolutely. And is there anything that a first time home buyer should do instead if they feel pressured instead of waiving a condition?
Yeah, you can fulfill it, but it depends on the agreement of purchase and sale. It's highly contextual. So there may be ways
Yeah.
out of the contract, which is why you always want it to be reviewed as soon as possible.
Yeah. If we're getting too close to the end of the conditional period on a condition and they're feeling pressured to waive it, what I would do is I would ask to negotiate an extension so
Extension.
that they get a little bit more time
Sure.
to fulfill the condition for peace of mind. If they feel like that's not something that they want to do, then it should be in the contract that that particular condition it's basically, if it doesn't get waived or fulfilled, then the contract is null and void.
Yeah.
Excellent. There is one more question about closing day in Ontario. What
Yeah.
actually happens and what are the top reasons keys get delayed?
So the first thing we look for is the bank to send the money. Once the bank sends the money, we send it to the seller's lawyer. The seller's lawyer depends where we are on their priority list, but once they receive confirmation that the money's been delivered in closing documents, they'll release the deed and then the deed can be registered. That all has to happen between 9 to 5 because that's the land registry's hours. And so keys can be delayed for a number of reasons. If mortgage instructions are late, if mortgage funds are late, if the wire is still in the air, if they don't have the money on time, if they didn't release on time. Sometimes there's an issue with TerraView, which is the land registry system. So keys can be delayed for all those reasons.
Wow. Is there
But I always
anything
say you'll get keys between 2 to 5 p.m. on your closing day. That's generally the timeline.
is there anything buyers and sellers can do just before closing, 7 days before closing to reduce stress?
Yeah, just get the money to your lawyer as soon as you have the accounting is really the most important thing. And just talk to your lawyer and see, hey, do we have mortgage instructions? Is everything in control? Sellers can do the same thing and ask the purchaser's lawyer, hey, do you have mortgage instructions? Are we on track for closing? I always like to do that on my sales just to
Right.
give my sellers peace of mind of knowing that everything's on track. Like, hey, they got mortgage instructions. They're signing with this lawyer on their lawyer on this date. So everything's in control. You don't need to worry.
Amazing. And is there anything they should avoid doing a week before closing? Anything that
Don't make
could
any big
disrupt the deal?
purchases because you never know what's going to happen.
So true. I would love to know when you're buried in closings and deadlines, what is your go to song or artist to help you stay focused?
Anything by Drake. I love Drake. So anything by Drake is good with me.
Drake, our Canadian boy. That's awesome. Is there a particular song that kind of gets you in? Okay, I got to get through this.
I like Fair Trade. Fair Trade's probably my favorite song by Drake.
If buying and selling had a soundtrack, what song would you assign to the offer accepted, conditional period, and closing day?
In the Air by Phil Collins.
Now I'm laughing because in the air means we don't know what's going on, but you know what's
Sometimes
going
we
on.
don't. Sometimes we don't.
Sometimes we don't. Absolutely. This has been so much fun, Umar. I have learned a lot. I always learn a lot in these podcasts, and that's why I like to dig into a lot of those questions. But if there are any other questions that come up, I definitely want to bring you back. I appreciate your time and thank you again for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. And I think it's a great podcast and we did an excellent job. So thank you once again. Hats off to you.
Thank you.